What obstacle did you overcome in your life that you will be sharing with us today?
Oh, many. My name's Mary Elizabeth, and I had a nickname of Betty, and I was born in 1934. And so I went to school during the war years. I figured that out, of World War II. And I had an interesting home life, and so I loved to read. And that was my salvation. I read a great deal. And went, to Battle Creek, Verona, WK, Battle Creek Central. And Otha McCracken was my counselor then. And she said, well, you're going to the University of Michigan. And I said, that's how it was done, no trauma. And so I did win a Regents Scholarship to U of M. But I came from a family, we didn't know much about it. Fortunately, I had been guided into a college prep sequence by a student that said, what are you doing in general math? You should be in algebra. And with that switch, it bumped me into a different line. And so I was there. I thought everything was fine. I went to U of M and discovered then that the scholarship was just for tuition and books, not for room and board. Big revelation. That's an obstacle. And I had enough money to pay for one semester, and I had also picked nursing for the dumbest reason. I really wanted to leave Battle Creek, and so I thought, well, I'll become an airline stewardess. But you had to be 21, and I thought, well, I'll fill in with those years, by just going to school. And nursing sounded like a good idea. The options for women were getting married, nursing, secretary, or teaching, and that was about it, really. Those were your options. They didn't have you thinking any further than those. And I also had a boyfriend, and he wanted to get married and so on. And it was very earth-shaking to me. My folks didn't have the money for another semester, and my daughter, bless her heart, she said, well, Mother, why didn't you go to financial aid? There was no financial aid, period. So I quit U of M, came home, and knew I'd made a big mistake. And I got married, had 4 children, and then KCC opened up a little bit later. And I thought, aha, because every fall I would get severely depressed. And I couldn't figure it out. And then I finally found the reason. I really like school. I like being a student and so on. So I went back to school. It worked, but the biggest thing, I became an English major. And that obstacle of being a nurse, I love literature, I love reading. It wasn't work to me. I thought, the thing in my little pea brain, I thought everybody can write, everybody reads, literature and all, and they don't. And so I changed, and I thought this is where I should be. So an obstacle sometimes turns out to be the right thing. And I became a teacher. And the irony, I've stayed right in Battle Creek. My husband had a job at Kellogg Company. He was a chemist. And so on. So even things that you think might be obstacles aren't necessarily obstacles.
You said you started going to KCC when they first started offering classes. So how is that?
Very good. I think they started maybe in, I can't remember when it was, several years. And so I thought, I can take night classes in there. And when Jeff got in kindergarten, I took a couple of night classes, and I really liked it. I thought Last Chance was written over the door, and I really enjoyed it. My first class was English of course, and I liked it. And then when he went to kindergarten, I took morning classes. Then when he hit first grade, I used to drive home, peel out of the parking lot and get home for the school bus and and then I transferred to Western for my junior and senior years. And then I did some student teaching and did my teaching at Lakeview, student, the apprentice type teaching there. And I was offered a job there, and which was all right, but I also got a fellowship for my master's, and that had money to it. So I went through that and got that. So.
How long were you a teacher?
For about 32 years.
32 years?
Uh-huh.
Do you remember all the places that you taught at?
Well, I went to one junior high, and I was a traveling teacher, and that was interesting. And it was after that that I thought, I think I'll get my master's. And I got my master's degree. Though, kind of getting back to the times, my mother graduated in 1913, and it was the first graduating class in the new Central building, and it had a planetarium, and it was considered, to be the class. And then I graduated from Central. But to tie it to the book Night, you see, as I said, I was going to school during the war years, and up through I would have been 10 in 44, and then in 45, and we got our news from newsreels, and they used to show them. We'd have an assembly, and they would show the bodies being shoved into graves by bulldozers and all. And so I well know of concentration camps, that they did exist. It was horrible. And later on, when I was teaching, I ended up teaching at KCC, and I had a student, Ingeborg, who came over as a German war bride, and her mother-in-law forbade her to speak German to her children, so they never became bilingual. But she told me how really easy, Germany was a well-educated nation and so on, but once they get a hold of the propaganda, the media, and the news, that's why when I hear reporters and journalists disparaged, I get really upset about it. But thank heavens you have a wide variety.
Yeah. Do you remember what it was like just during school or at your own home? Like, what was it like with the war going on?
Yes, we had rationing, and we got books of stamps and little coins, like they were cardboard. And I remember that there was a severe bubblegum shortage, and we used to line up around the block at little corner grocery stores to buy bubblegum. But that didn't affect me too much, really, though there was rationing, gas rationing, and so people, didn't pleasure drive at all. You took the bus a lot. Oh, well, when you'd go in neighborhoods, almost every house had a red bordered flag with a blue star if they were still alive, they were in service, because the draft took a lot of people. And then the gold star for those that had died. And I remember in high school, I think it was junior high or high school, Paul Tammy was playing. He started to play My Buddy, and the kids just streamed out. And he realized what he'd done, and he stopped the band and started playing a march or some other song, because they had all lost, fathers, brothers, cousins, uncles, aunts, and so on. So from that, it was good. Not good, but very revealing. It does impact the citizens.
Did you know anyone who was impacted by the war or died in the war?
No, because my brother, fortunately, had an eye injury and he was blind in one eye, so he was 4F. But I got a lot of questions about why my brother wasn't in service, but the minute I said, well, he's blind in one eye, that was acceptable. So that's why I remember the kids storming out, and that the little girl I used to play with across the street on Yale Street, her older brother died, and I knew him. And I knew why she was running out, and I thought, I wish he'd change that music, And he caught on very fast, too.
Can you tell me about your family, both like when you were growing up and your family when you married your husband?
Oh, okay. Well, when I was growing up, my mother she was a secretary. She held on to her job. My grandma didn't have anything. There wasn't Social Security or anything. And we kind of all lived. My grandpa had been a printer. And when the Depression really hit, and it lasted really for a long time, a lot of people didn't have jobs, money. There was no social net for that. And my father did find work in New York and left. And at the same time I was born, my brother was 8 years older. And so my mother worked where most mothers didn't. And my grandma took care of me. And my brother lived there. So it was kind of unsettled. The Depression did impact for a long time. The lack of, money. Nobody had jobs. And my grandma was very worried about losing her money and what would happen and so on, because she had money in the old security. It was called